Are you questioning your reality? Do you feel gaslighted? It's not you, it's the media. I am Suchitra Vijayan and I'll be joined by Bhakti Sringarpure and Madhuri Shastri to eviscerate the propaganda, set the record straight, and offer much needed moral clarity. Tune in each week. It's not you, it's the media, a podcast by the Polis Project.
We are back, and today we are talking about the media's blame games. The people have voted, the people have spoken. It didn't go as planned for liberal media, who have spent an entire 100-some days of this campaign fawning over Kamala. This is what we have already discussed in our podcast episode, in the live coverage of the elections. Donald Trump not only won the president, but confounding to everybody is that he also won the popular vote. And it's not even really been that long, but liberal media has already begun to avoid a reckoning with what actually went wrong. The pundits are pretending to be critical, but who are they really criticizing? Can liberal media hold back on blaming Muslims, Latinos, black men, Gen Z, progressives, Jill Stein? Who else is on the list? Will the mainstream media pause on their thinly veiled racism and centrism? Nope. It's too late. The sugarcoating has commenced and the blame games have begun, but we are also coming to play. And guess what? Let's start with you, Madhuri. Who do you blame for Kamala's completely predictable loss?
That we've been harping on about. I blame the progressives. I blame the progressives, and I'm actually going to, my favorite, Jonathan Chait, in his column has written basically again about how progressives are to be blamed. First of all, it's ludicrous because he had two delusional columns claiming that how Harris was running as a centrist or a conservative was actually working. And one of them, I think, was titled something like, stop complaining, it's working, blah, blah, blah.
Ugh.
And then now that there's a failure in his recent column, like yesterday, he manages to shift blame back on the progressives again. And, he achieves this psychotic, anti-intellectual, amoral, what is just a vendetta at this point by saying that the seeds of this Harris failure were planted 8 years ago, not when Bernie was robbed of his nomination, as I think, but when Trump won and the Democratic Party, shifted to the left. They should have shifted to the center, but they shifted to the left. And there was so much resentment, and Trump was so unpopular that they mistakenly believed that their base was more progressive than it actually was. And then comes Biden's presidency. And during his primary, again, it was a race to the left because of this mistaken belief the electorate is actually more leftward leaning. But Biden wins by running to the center. And then when he gets elected on the mandate of like, I'm not Trump, I'm just your average, your literal average Joe. When he wins, Chait says Biden's win happened so quickly that this disillusionment about who the base was still there. And then instead of continuing to govern in the center, he somehow makes this claim that Biden ran as a progressive president, right? He said that basically Biden eschews his centrism as president, and he actually ends up favoring policies that were advocated for by Warren and Sanders. And when post-COVID inflation happened, Biden followed this flawed strategy of growth that was designed by the anti-neoliberal movement, blah, blah, blah. And he did all these progressive things. And look, that was obviously wrong. And why was his being a progressive wrong? Because Kamala couldn't distance herself from those progressive narratives. So when she correctly, in his estimation, runs to the center, she's not able to explain her leftist record. And any questions about, why are you actually a leftist? She treated, according to Chait, as accusations. And so this was all a big problem because the Dems, once again, were fooled by how progressive their base was, or they were bullied into thinking that their base was progressive and bullied into, adopting activist language, blah, blah, blah. So he has sort of arrived at the right destination, which was that Harris ran a bad campaign, but his worldview is so skewed. And his desire for erecting this progressive boogeyman, straw man is so strong that he does not even realize that her running as a conservative was actually a stupid idea. Because, as we have said, why would anybody vote for a democratic conservative? So somehow he does this, it's the progressives, you bullied, you fooled, it's you.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is one heck of a word salad.
I cannot believe I
Wow.
read that for the podcast, but
I
you know,
know. Thank you for doing God's work, as they say. Suchitra, who do you blame?
P. Diddy.
Let's hear it.
Look, look, I think what we're really looking at is a time when vast majority of the Democratic base were absolutely clear and articulate about what they wanted. So I want to actually go back, and I think it's Owen Jones who tweeted that how he's in New York and he got on the back of this taxi and his immigrant cab driver voted for Trump. And my first response was like, pathologize your white voters. Who are Trump's voters? Vast majority of white men and white women across class and economic hierarchies have voted for Trump. And what we're really getting is op-ed after op-ed, commentary after commentary, telling us that it's the fault of Latino men, it's the fault of black men, it's the fault of students, it's the fault of Muslims and Arabs who you didn't even allow a place to have a conversation with.
right.
So there is just an entire spectrum, of underdogs that are now the scapegoats, without really interrogating the reality of American presidency. So this is a mercantile presidency. It's a flawed electoral system.
Mhm.
And then every time we've needed a win, we've relied on the backs of brown and black and other progressive communities to bring the Democrats a win. And in reality, despite all of this, you keep throwing them under the bus over and over again.
The ultimate insanity around, there were all these tweets, and it is just so hilariously stupid to me because all these tweets were saying, once you get deported, now you'll know you're going to be punished for voting for Trump. This is so stupid. First of all, undocumented workers cannot vote. Okay, so who are you directing your rage to? All you're showing is that you are the most racist liberal Democrat on planet Earth. Okay. Undocumented workers do not get to vote. They deal with the effects of who you vote for, essentially. Americans vote for. Yes, within that, there is some sort of statistic saying Latin Americans voted overwhelmingly for Trump. There is a statistic showing a lot of Muslims voted for Trump. And you know what? No matter how many Latin Americans, Muslim Americans vote for Trump, it still never, ever, ever overrides the majority of the white people who do the voting. I'm sorry. Take it or leave it. It does not move the needle, whatever that number is. So, what it is really, the blame games are just the most disgusting games out there in terms of just showing how exactly racist you are. And of course, liberal media is not just racist, they're intersectional in their racism. So they are not only going to blame black people, Latinos, Muslims, they're also blaming the men, because guess what, gender is here now. We're going to talk about misogyny.
I want to say a lot about misogyny, but the first thing I wanted to say was these talking points were of like who to blame were provided to the liberal media by Obama when he went and castigated black voters and
Oh.
basically chided them. They were basically provided on a platter by them to AOC. All of these liberal darlings had already basically set the stage for the liberal media to come in and then swoop and pick their, like vultures, pick their prey on who they're going to dismantle. And to this misogyny, there is certainly room for the narrative that America is not ready for a female president. But I am beginning to question it more and more because every other progressive woman of color, including AOC herself, who ran, has re-won their seat.
That is such a good point. I love this point so much.
Thank you. And this includes Rashida Tlaib, Ilhan Omar, all these progressive women of color have won their seats. So what do we mean misogyny? It is really seeming a little bit of a cop out to me at this stage.
That said, misogyny exists,
Sure,
racism
sure.
exists, but I don't think it came out to play the way the media blame games are going to.
Oh, I certainly don't think that the 13 million Democrats who didn't show up to vote for Kamala didn't show up because she was a woman or because she was a black. I don't even
In
think.
fact, those people are excited about that. Those are exactly the people who are excited by those types of representation
Yeah.
first and all those things,
No, I think, okay, let's also kind of go into the idea of why are we discussing this? We're
Yeah.
discussing this because here is a Democratic Party giving alibi for its failures for the future.
Yeah.
Every time the Democratic Party fails, they have, I mean, I wish they spent so much time putting together the actual policy positions that they spend time putting together who to blame and who to kind of throw under the bus. And I think
Mhm.
one of the things we saw, and I really want to go back to the Hillary Clinton campaign, is that even today, when Hillary Clinton gets introduced, she gets introduced in all of these spaces, whether it's Columbia University, whether it is like these think tanks, whether she's doing an event with Malala, you know, she's introduced as the woman president we could have had, but we made a mistake. United States of America apologizes to you. I'm
Of
like,
course.
no, you ran a shitty campaign. You are a career liar. You lied about everything from, snipers sniping at you in Bosnia to, the justification of the war in Libya to
Mhm.
now, I don't know, lying about, I don't know. I mean, the point is you are a war criminal who continues to be given respect, resources, positions, and we are still told that Hillary Clinton lost because America was not ready, that its voters were like too misogynistic, that she was too white, she was too woman. No, she lost because Democrats ran a shitty, shitty campaign. Obama left a country in wars in Afghanistan. Obama expanded the drone program. Obama left this country in a place that might have looked good, but in reality was not.
Mhm.
There was a disparity of wealth, and we are not discussing the real issues. So, what we're doing right now is trying to, rather than have real conversations about what the policy positions should be, we are really just sitting here and telling the world that this is the template to justify a colossal failure now and the other failures that we are going to produce in the next couple of years.
Absolutely. But Suchitra, you're being so unfair because poor Kamala Harris and team only had like 100 days. And Biden lined up like old dudes, men who didn't really understand her, and they messed up the whole campaign and they couldn't see clearly. Can't you see how she was the one thrown under the bus?
Completely.
Everybody else was wrong. All she and her campaign people wanted was to, they did everything.
Sure, they did, but also,
Everything wrong. Oh my
I
God.
mean, there was no a democratic primary to choose a
Yes.
presidential nominee.
And I'll tell you why this point is especially so important was because of how badly she lost the primaries in 2020. She is unpopular. We already know she is unpopular. Why do we
I
think things?
always forget this part that she lost the
Yes,
primary. That I just
yes.
always forget it. Yeah.
She lost. She lost badly. She is an unpopular candidate. She is a bad candidate. So simply by foisting her down our throats, and she was also largely an absentee vice president. So I
Mhm.
don't know. I think maybe it seemed to me, 4 years ago, that the strategy was that Biden was so clearly, advancing down this path of cognitive decline very rapidly, and so they were going to front Kamala as, the incumbent. She's not an incumbent, but they were going to front her. He stepped out of the race too late. I do think this is true because it has not given her a chance to really show who she is, and neither has she taken the chance when she had it. And she was unable to distinguish herself from Biden. She made this big, 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 big mistake of being unable to distinguish herself from Biden. And Biden was extremely unpopular. He was polling really, really, really badly. So, why would you, in the absence of a primary, when you have the opportunity to speak about your policies, not distinguish yourself from the person who is polling so badly?
I
It
know.
is beyond insane to me.
Can I add one thing though about this? Just a total aside on this cognitive decline thing. How is it possible that this person that we are claiming is in cognitive decline is bankrolling like a proper genocide. Like,
Right.
it is out of control. I mean, Israel is bombing everybody with whose bombs? Biden's, Biden and Kamala's bombs. And what is it? What is this cognitive decline? I don't even necessarily buy the theory, because then the genocide is just one big disability accommodation for him.
Mhm.
I cannot do that. I don't even know. This is just an absolute and utter aside. That said, it was very clear his fatigue and his inability to cope with questions, and he couldn't deal with Trump's like insane energy or whatever Trump is hopped up on, which drugs we don't know. But at least you had to distinguish yourself
Yeah.
from
Yeah.
this mess.
Right. In the absence of a primary specifically, right? Like this is your opportunity. So this is what was so frustrating to me.
No, I just want to say that in the 2020 primaries, it was Joe Biden followed by Bernie Sanders, and the third place went to Elizabeth Warren, and then Michael Bloomberg, and then Pete.
Thank you.
Right? So this was your 2020 primary. Now, if we go down all the way to look at Kamala Harris, she ranked third from the bottom, and then she suspended her campaign, and that should tell you
Exactly.
where we are. The most popular candidates were Joe Biden, Bernie Sanders, followed by Elizabeth Warren, Michael Bloomberg, even Amy.
Amy Klobuchar?
Yes, after Pete, followed by Tulsi Gabbard, and then this guy called Storm Steyer. So these were your
We
top
don't even know who the people. Oh my God. But that is it. And it was such an undemocratic anointing. Why would people go and vote for her? You are just picking the worst candidate,
No.
and you are just, it's just easy for them to blame because they are able to completely evade responsibility.
Is it true that she was an absent vice president? Aren't they all absent all the time? I mean, I'm sorry. What I follow is African politics avidly, and I know she put on some nice dresses and went to Ghana and stuff.
You may be absent all the time unless you were there was certainly some kind of messaging. I was not imagining it. I'm not able to point out exactly to what it is, but I'm
Yeah.
not imagining it when we all knew she was being sort of fronted as, don't worry, we know Joe is, not really there, but Kamala is there. So she was really
Ah,
front.
okay.
Like there was this messaging that happened 4 years ago which was meant to soothe voters' fears about Joe Biden's cognitive state of mind, that she is going to
Mm.
be there and she was going to step up and she would essentially run as an incumbent. Right. And so I thought, okay, Biden's going to, throw in the towel 2 years into his presidency and then Kamala is going to pick up and she can run as an incumbent. None of that happened, but she didn't even bother to try to position herself as an incumbent. She made no I don't know, maybe she went to Ghana and things like that, but I didn't really see her making any.
I mean, I am totally joking. I mean, that's felt empty. You know,
Yeah, of course.
that was empty. And but yes, there's a general feeling that VPs are sort of not quite in the mix.
Yes.
Though I do recall, and maybe it's because it was 8 years of Obama. I do recall Biden.
Yeah.
Maybe I recall because he used to kind of feel up women and there used to be all these reels, and maybe I recall the negative the negatives, but I recall
The
Biden, and maybe
presence. You recall the presence,
I
right?
recall presence. Yeah.
Yeah. And we're all seeing Vance. We all know that Vance is also sort of being fronted as, okay, maybe Trump is completely like, he actually suffers from incontinence. But don't worry, we've got this young Tea Party Republican who is going to take over. So there is that fronting of the vice president, especially when we talk about ageism.
Someone with like this crazy sick brains,
Yeah.
even if you go with Donald Trump is stupid and he's just he's really dumb and he can't really speak English or whatever the stupid stuff they say about him. And yeah, he sucks. But with JD Vance, we're going to get a totally different animal, and it's
Yeah.
really terrifying actually.
Right.
Yeah.
So I actually want to disagree on that. Two things. I think the most, so 2 points. One, I think the most famous Harris
Okay.
in the Biden administration was Maya Harris. I think at this point in time has sold more, I don't know, buttons and books and whatever. But I actually see JD, I actually feel the Republican Party has actually distanced itself from JD
I-
Vance. I don't think
Oh.
even Trump likes JD Vance. I feel there's a lot of even Trump says that, yeah, but vice presidents actually don't matter.
Sure.
He actually says this, right? Look, I think the thing with Kamala Harris is that, one, I just don't know what she stands for.
Hmm.
I don't know
Yeah,
what she stood for as a
absolutely.
nominee running the primaries. I don't know what she stood for as a vice president, and I don't think I know what she stands for now after the vice being a vice president running for the presidency.
Hmm.
And I think Yasmin Nair has a pretty solid essay that she wrote months ago, as soon as Harris announced her presidency, that Harris is going to lose, right? And one of the points that Yasmin makes is that there is no policy position. Like, I don't know what you stand for, which means that it's easy for you in opposition
Yeah.
because you lack. It's like the Twilight series, right? It's like all of the heroines of the Twilight series. You are so bland, you're so basic that every woman can identify you
Hmm.
with the
I
Democratic
know.
politics.
I concede to both your political thinking. I think it's much sharper and fine tuned than mine is, honestly. The only thing I'll say about JD Vance is he is in the house, in the whitest house, the white house. So damage can be unleashed as the years go by, and there's something about him that to me is a little bit more terrifying and a little bit more shrewd and a little bit more like there's a craziness to him that I actually don't find in Trump.
Also, let's not forget that the first presidency was full of incompetent clowns. This administration is coming to play. This is
Yeah,
going to
yeah.
be a far more stealth, far more nasty. He has a professional class whose entire expertise is to destroy, decimate. And so let's also understand that the first presidency was not expected. It was full of bumbling fools and incompetent idiots. And they still did a lot of damage, by
Yeah,
the way.
that's what I wanted to say. They
Yeah,
did
they
so
still did a
much.
lot of damage. So now I
Yeah,
have a
I
feeling if
know,
we have
I know.
an insurrection, Vance would be there in drag, breaking down stuff.
I definitely do think that. I mean, I hear you, Suchitra, completely on the distancing from Vance, but my memory of the Republican Party is it doesn't matter. I think that one thing the Democrats could actually learn from them is how committed they are to their agenda and to their principles. They will back anyone. They backed Trump repeatedly. They have backed him three times now. They all know he's an idiot. They're not fools either. They all know, what he is capable of and what he is not capable of. And yet they have backed him every single time. So they might distance themselves now, but when the moment comes for them to back Vance, they will do whatever it takes to back them because their allegiance is to their agenda. It has
Mhm.
always been to their agenda. They have never cared, like the Democrats have, about who it is that is embodying that agenda. So even the distancing, I take your point, but I think they will throw their full weight behind him. And during a re-election campaign, they will continue to throw their weight behind him. They do not care. They care about abortion being outlawed. They care about tough immigration policy. They care about tax cut. They care about tariffs. They care about stacking the courts. They care about the long run policy in a way in which the Democrats could really afford to learn from them. Every single thing that Obama could have achieved in his first term, the Trump presidency went above and beyond to achieve with a coterie of bumbling idiots because all they care about is the agenda. They will
Yes.
stand behind anyone who embodies the agenda. This is
Yeah.
really my belief of them.
Absolutely. And just to kind of pivot a little bit from this, I don't want us to not discuss. I want us to
Sure.
focus a little bit on the blaming of the third party candidate. Jill Stein kindly came on the Police Project live stream. You both spoke to her. And there was a lot of focus actually on the amount her party has been vilified, the amount she has been vilified. It's, I don't know. Do you want to just summarize actually what she was saying?
I think for me, I think one of the biggest learning in this election is how many third party candidates there are. Of course, we only had Jill Stein. There are other third party candidates who have been out there who have other agendas. There's a lot of radical agendas about equality and kind of remaking the system. And I think it's important. I think it's important for us to have all of those parties. And I think in case of Jill Stein, I think the things that we really focused on with her was one, what does it mean for us to have a third party candidate and why should we have one? Second was, of course, really why did the vast sum of attacks against her, whether it was when she ran, I think she got 1.5 million votes the year Hillary Clinton ran. Again, she and Bernie Sanders were blamed. And then she very clearly broke it down and she said that no, votes are not for granted, you have to work for it. And then she said that it's one of the things that they're pushing for is to have enough votes in order for them to start contesting in state elections. Of course, that didn't happen because she actually got much lesser votes this time than in 2016. And I think finally, one of the things that she spoke about and made a point about was that the boogeyman of the Trump presidency and the coming fascism, and she very clearly said fascism is already here.
Amazing.
We are body slamming children, students now. We are treating people poor now. Fascism is already here. We are already treating the country's most vulnerable in a manner that is despicable. We are already capitulated to the billionaire class. So I think that really was a takeaway, and I think all of us just learned, just engaging with that view. And I think it also starts with Ruby Hamad's piece. Ruby says that Democrats believe that your votes are a currency. It's not.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. This idea that the vote is constantly owed to you. You don't have to earn it. You
Yeah.
have to, you're just this brat, I want, and that's it, Oh, and do you want to see what would happen if you didn't vote for me? This thing is not working. This thread is not working. And liberal media doesn't get it because that is how they ran their entire, every single platform, every single mainstream media platform was just don't vote for Trump. But why should we vote for Kamala? Ask that. Why would
Correct.
we hate Jill Stein? Ask that.
Correct. Correct. I really want to emphasize this point because this idea, that people of color, other marginalized voters are going to vote for Democrats no matter what is definitely not something that you can bank on when you have a populist president like Trump. And Bernie's success should have showed that to the Democrats, right?
Yeah.
Like they were just like, oh, there are only the moderates. They only considered the moderates to be people who might change their minds. They have so taken for granted their marginalized vote base that they have not stopped to consider that maybe they are also voters who might change their mind. Maybe they are also voters who are not just going to throw their lot in with them after repeated disillusionment from Obama, after repeated and kind of outright mistreatment in this election by the Democrats. They did not look at them as voters who are capable of making a different decision. And this is a big, big problem. And it ties into this other aspect that we were talking about with Jill Stein at our live stream, as well as Ruby's piece, which is the two-party system is no longer something that feels tenable to much of the American public. People are voting for maybe even not necessarily Jill Stein herself, but as Ruby says, for the idea that we have to move past the corporate conservative takeover of the American establishment.
Absolutely.
It's been a conservative takeover. People are seeing it, and people are maybe they are building maybe they are voting in protest for Jill Stein. It doesn't matter. What it matters is that these are movement building votes. These are
Yeah.
people who want to build a movement outside of the two party system. These are voters who are malleable, for lack of a better word. They are malleable, just as malleable as people in the center, and who are disillusioned and feeling unrepresented by the Democratic Party.
Mhm.
And it sort of all ties into this idea that what we have now just doesn't represent the
Absolutely.
voter base.
Absolutely. And I'm going to make my same hackneyed point, which is that, we have had a year of liberal media chiding everybody about being anti Semitic. This is anti Semitic, that is anti Semitic. Yet, as soon as you have a Jewish candidate, all you do is work your ass off to destroy them. Bernie Sanders, Jill Stein. Why? That's not anti Semitism. I call anti Semitism on this thing. But we should not, we should definitely discuss the biggest issue in the room, blaming Muslims, blaming Palestinian voters, blaming Michigan.
I think what we really have to see is the way in which Palestinians and Arab Muslim, Arab Christian voters have been absolutely disrespected and gaslit. They are being constantly told that somehow seeing their families and relatives being murdered, massacred every day, somehow the same as the Muslim ban that stopped people from traveling to the United
I
States.
know.
Genocide is not the same as making it hard for someone to travel.
Absolutely.
I think for me, what was really disgusting, I mean, I get Liz Cheney also. Like with Liz Cheney, it was like, okay, fine, you're bringing the daughter. But it was a lot of the other things. It was the Democratic Convention when there was this moment where there was these protesters, and you saw a black delegate walk by and like snicker, right? Like literally, like, oh, what are you doing? Like,
Mm.
do you not have empathy? And that kind of relates back to the thing where you're talking about now they want Gaza to be turned into a parking lot. They're like, oh, now that Trump is here, we're going to turn Gaza into a parking lot. Like, you guys are going to be destroyed. I'm like, they have been destroyed already.
I love the Americans always thinking the parking lot is somehow the worst place on planet Earth. I mean, just like a totally different mixed metaphor, like ish, calling out this ridiculous idea of turning places into parking lots. Afghanistan was supposed to be a parking lot after 9/11. I remember that. I mean, what are these people? How low is the state of discourse? How low? How
Yeah,
low? And they are not Republicans. These are our great, highly qualified liberal Democrats.
roads. I also want to bring up the Bill Clinton. For me, the most nauseating and disgusting, I would say, is Bill Clinton and Richie Torres.
Yeah.
Bill Clinton saying, "Oh, they were there first." Like, yeah, you're going to get massacred. Like,
Sick.
yeah, fine. I mean, I felt like Clinton was having his fucking black summer. Another thing that I really wanted to bring up is Richie Torres is also how identity politics is so weaponized
Hmm.
to make the point. The idea that you want to bring in certain groups who have suffered historical injustice to turn around and say, oh, by the way, I am going to rubber stamp if this injustice deserves your time. But also for me, I think one of the things we should, at least I want to mention this, is that there's this radio host called Charlemagne the God who went on
Yeah.
Anderson Cooper and said, actually held Anderson Cooper to account. I don't agree with everything he says, but he said, you do not cover Trump's fascism enough.
Yeah.
Mm.
Like, if you want to blame people, blame Trump's fascism. Spend more time covering how Trump is fascist. Tell us what's wrong with these campaigns. And I think that's a point well taken. Like
Yeah.
the liberal media, while calling Trump a fascist, did not spend any substantial brain power trying to break down to people what this means. And they absolutely failed.
This is so true. And the funny part is one of the insane sort of things about the way in which all of this is now suddenly unfolding. The election is only a few days behind us, the results are in, and so on, is how contradictory. How everyone is just doing a total about turn. They are just saying exactly the opposite of what they were saying. So they will say it's not Palestine. Palestine does not matter for this. Okay, this is not going to matter. I don't think it's the war. Now it's like, oh, people don't like war. War is unpopular. It is Palestine. Maybe we should think about that. Okay. The other thing is that literally newspapers, TV channels, experts, Twitter celebrities were saying stuff like she ran the most perfect social media campaign in history, the most perfect campaign. And then now it's like she ran the worst campaign in history. She had the worst advisors. Biden really set her up to fail. Everybody is terrible. I mean, what is this? What a cloud are people living under? It is very strange to me how the blame games, are even just like a complete switch.
That part doesn't surprise me so much again, because as I said, I think earlier in
Sure.
this podcast, that AOC and Obama, they've been feeding them these talking points. Like, here's who you should blame. You should blame Jill Stein. I mean, AOC called her predatory, and said she couldn't even so much as win anything like a bingo game. And she shows up, every 5 years to steal, 4 years to steal votes. And you have Obama chiding black people. So they've all given their victims to, or, the prey on a platter. And so that has really sort of bothered me. And so this capitulation has not surprised me as much. And also, just from like a different perspective, I think it always comes down to me, to this complete inability of the liberal media and the Democrats to take any sort of accountability for their own failure. It is nothing new. They have failed so many times. You would think that they would have a very good playbook on how to be like, okay, we're going to do better. They cannot even do that. I don't know, because maybe it is just too, my view is that it is very difficult for voters and the media to accept their own complicity. There is a sort of pain in it, and it is something that they would rather not do, and shifting the blame is simply easy. And so they do it repeatedly, they do it time and again. They've done this boogeyman thing we've been seeing. It's a strategy as old as time itself. They've been vilifying everyone from Palestinians to Muslims to now all the people. Now again, they get to vilify Palestinians and Muslims. So it's nothing new, and it is just it's almost childish and juvenile, to the point of I
Mhm.
feel kind of disgusted by it. And I wish that they were not so juvenile, but the truth is that they have really been unmasked. They have really, really, really been unmasked. My prediction for whether they will do anything differently next year, no, I don't think they will. I think we are kind of stuck in this.
I just had a point to make, is that if you see the Democratic Party not as a political party that serves the interests of the
Right.
people, but as a corporation that they are, all of this makes sense. Which year did Democratic Party make the most amount of money? Under Trump. They raised more money under Trump than they raised the
I know.
boogeyman. So this is a corporation, and this corporation makes more money when Trump is in power, and they did make a lot of money.
Yeah.
Now, another thing that I want us to kind of talk about is, and this is also, think of this as some kind of like a PSA. You're going to see a lot of Democratic, extended arm of the Democratic Party, a lot of your activists and like community organizers and these like South Asian leaders telling you that we're going to build power. I want to know who you're building this power for and for whom.
And with
I
whom?
want to know, why is it that genocide was not a red line for you? I want actual grassroots activists to make a red line saying that genocide is the genocide was the red line, genocide is the red line, and we will not work with anybody who
Yeah.
wanted to come and make peace between those calling for a genocide and those fighting and speaking out against it. We do not need people making some kind of concession. No, we do not want you.
Yeah.
I do not want to build power with an asshole who got on that South Asian for Harris campaign and raised millions of dollars, then claiming that they're going to speak out against and hold her accountable, and then say, yes, genocide, but reproductive rights. I don't want to build power with you.
Who said we now it's the time to resist, and then and Kamala Harris basically, or and even Joe Biden, they capitulated immediately. Everything is going to be like smooth, and we're going to just do beautiful harmonious transition. And
That's what they're focusing on now. Like, oh, let's just hand over gracefully. It's like,
yeah,
who cares? Like, nobody cares. You lost so badly. Just bury your head in the sand with have some shame.
I know.
Feel some sense of shame.
I know.
And I want everybody for whom, Suchitra, as you pointed out, genocide was not a red line, and who chided people and who scolded. And even now, I mean, the liberal media has not stopped their scolding. They're scolding, all Americans.
Very quickly, I'm just going to rattle off some of the things that our researcher and producer Devraj has put. Okay, so for example, you have LA Times. All of them are same title. Okay, what went wrong? What went wrong? What went wrong? Okay, Dems have lost touch with American working class realities. Okay, where were you before? Okay, you have Anna Betts in The Guardian, who claims that she was nervous over celebrity rallies for Harris. This is what has helped us lose. Okay, there is Democrats sink into despair, writes Politico. Okay, and this is now they're despairing over the swing states and what didn't flip. Then we have blame it on gender, says Katie Rogers of the New York Times. Why did Kamala lose women's votes, writes Al Jazeera.
Katie Subramanian, Biden's baggage too heavy. Harris couldn't shake the anti-Biden sentiment that permeated much of the electorate.
And then
I
there's
want
super racist stuff from the BBC as well, which is talks about underperformance of Black and Latino men. And this is such a kind of a gross way to talk about it. But yeah, I mean, the list is long. Mainstream media is not helping itself. And, there is this hope that there will be a critical analysis, there will be a historical review. But I feel so hopeless that this is not going to happen. I mean, I don't know. We can try, we can continue to push a counter narrative, but this feels so painful. I mean, already within a week, you're going to sugarcoat everything that has gone wrong. You're going to do an about turn. and you're not going to have the reckoning that is much, much, much needed.
Yeah. I think that I don't know what it will take for this reckoning, because speaking of underperforming, Harris's performance in New York, which is a deep, deep blue state, okay, is really something that
Yeah.
we need to be aghast about. And it should really send some warning bells ringing through some Democrats' heads. Because let me just tell you, okay, she did win New York City, but in the state, she drew 900,000 fewer votes than Joe Biden in 2020. Biden beat Trump by 23 percentage points that year, as did Hillary Clinton in 2016. And Harris's margin of victory in New York State was just shy of 12%. This is New York,
I
okay?
know.
So this, if this does not ring some alarm bells, the deepest, bluest state, after California, then I mean, I don't even know what it will take for the media to do a reckoning, because these are places that they just, these are votes they should be taking for granted, and they're not even able to do that anymore. So we are
I know.
in deep, 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 deep trouble.
And at the end of the day, it's like, who is suffering? I mean, it is the Palestinians right this second, it is the migrants right this second. But of course, I mean, the genocide is just out of control. And now that they've lost, and Trump and Netanyahu are doing a happy dance, can Biden stop sending bombs now? Can he stop, like, right now? It is a really depressing turn of events. I mean, in our case, we are going to continue to push and hold the media accountable. We are going to call out the media gaslighting. It is definitely not you, it's the media. And free Palestine,